This isn't meant to be one of those, no pun intended, boo-hoo give me attention pity stories. But since no one in my entire family believes me, or acknowledges that this happened, I will share it here. I am the oldest daughter of 4 children. I am now 20 years old, but this happened when I was only 7 or 8 years old. We moved to Norman, Oklahoma, after the birth of my little brother, and we moved into this house. This house was huge. I remember how excited my sister and I were to see this 3-story house, and even more so when we were told that we were going to live there. The house was old. My mother had informed us when we moved there that she thought it was to be built in the 1920s and had been owned by a rich couple until they died. The house was a pale peeling yellow, with tan shingles that were old, some were missing, and haphazardly strewn around the roof, but more or less in good condition. My sister and I began to roam around the yard as our parents unloaded the truck. Once my sister and I were in the yard around back, we decided to explore along the edges of this old house. After all, we were going to be living there. So, after exploring the backyard, we found what I now know as some old cellar doors that had an old, rusty lock on it. We tugged and pulled, but could not get it off. It was on there. So, eventually, after a few minutes, we stopped trying and went back to playing. After a while, my sister and I heard a loud creak. Looking for the noise, my eyes immediately looked to the cellar. The lock was now unlocked and on the ground, but the doors were closed. Assuming that my father and mother did it, and we just missed them, I ignored it and moved on. This was the beginning. Throughout our stay there were always strange things happening. Things like doors opening and closing, shadows, objects being misplaced, and the like. Things that my parents would claim were all from the house being old and drafty, and having 2 small children. After about a month of staying in the house, things got worse. I should start with the fact that we never used the basement. It was in shabby shape, and occasionally would flood, so we kept the door to it locked. I had been having terrible nightmares about that basement. I had had dreams of a man dragging me out of my bed and down the basement stairs. The dreams usually stopped there, but occasionally I would be led into the dreams into an old iron-footed tub that was filled with brown water, and I would wake as my face was forced into the water. I had never been exposed to any of those terrifying things. How could I just imagine them? Soon, the banging whispers began. They started softly, and usually around 1 a.m. before thumping up the stairs and then stopping in front of my door, and whispering incoherently. The thumping would be a continuous cycling from downstairs to my door. Then, after it had woken me and my entire family, it would stop. My parents always assumed it was me. I would be punished daily for staying up late and waking my newborn baby brother, even after begging and pleading that I had done nothing. This thumping continued for a long while until eventually my family and I adjusted to the sound and would sleep through it. But after that, things became terrifying for me. Firstly, you should know that my door is the closest to the stairs, and underneath the stairs was the entrance to the basement. I started waking at 1 a.m. to a cold slap to my face. My face would be stinging, and my eyes opened to a huge black shadow lingering over my bed. It would open what I assume is its mouth, and an ear-splitting shriek would emit from its being. It would scream, and lean into my face as I cried and hid under my covers. It would leave and slam my door, and after a few seconds, I would hear another door slam. I went back to sleep terrified. As the spirit gained rage from my fear, things got worse. The spirit became more bold. It would no longer just stand there. It would remove my blankets and tug at my toes before strangling me. I couldn't understand why, and my parents began accusing my babysitters for the bruises and marks, even when I told them what happened or how these things were happening. My father started to sleep in my room at this point. He wanted to make sure I wasn't having panic attacks because of my nightmares, and it stopped for about a week. Now at this point, we'd been living in the house for a good 6 months. My father was about to stop staying in my room at night when it happened. It finally decided to attack. My dad was asleep, and I was under the sheets, quietly playing my Pokemon game on my Game Boy, when I heard my door creak open and heavy footsteps walk in. I paid no mind to the sounds, and continued to play my game until I was lifted, sheets and all, into the air and then dropped on the cold wood. I screamed loudly, and my dad woke up from his sleep, wide-eyed and confused. He began shaking the sleep from his eyes. Something cold wrapped around my ankle and pulled me to the door. My father, a military man that stands at 6'3" and weighed 300 pounds, stood in charge, attempting to grab me from what he could not see, and was thrown back against the wall and knocked unconscious. I continued screaming as I was dragged towards the stairwell, and I saw my mother leave her room with a panicked look on her face as she chased me down the stairs. I didn't know where we were going, but I saw the basement door open downstairs as my head was being smacked on each stair and the railings. My mother tried to catch up, but it was faster than any human could have possibly been. After it crashed down my stairs, it dragged me into the basement and slammed the door closed. After a few seconds, I could hear the pulse in my ears, and my vision began to fade. I could hear my mother sobbing on the other side of the door, asking it to please let me go. It dragged me down the rickety wooden basement stairs and then released me, in front of an old claw-footed tub filled with brown water. I reached my hand up and felt the hot, sticky mess of my concussion, and I realized that I had stopped crying. My head was pounding, but I stood wobbly-legged and walked up the stairs. I could hear it, breathing on my neck, but I knew that if I stopped for 1 second, my night terrors would become a reality. Somehow, I unlocked the door, and we moved, obviously. But if I hadn't found the strength to get up, I'm afraid what it might have done to me or my family.